Hello, friends. This is our 6th episode of Lemon and Spoon. We have Jonathan, Jared, and me, Jeremiah, doing the podcast today.
And
let's answer the questions.
Okay, all right, sounds good. So this is our 6th episode, and we're going to start our podcast now. What questions do you have? Who's going to ask the first question? Oh, 2 hands up. Well, one of you would have to pick, or together you have to negotiate and figure out who's going to ask the first question. All right, some negotiations are happening. Okay, who won? Jonathan won. Okay, all right. Jonathan, what is your question?
Who was the first person to write the Bible?
The Bible. You mean the Christian Bible?
Yes.
Okay. Well, there is a Hebrew Bible, there is a Christian Bible. Bible is a collection of books, right? The word Bible means it's a collection of books. How many books are in the Bible? Oh, you're not going to count them all. You don't know all the names. There are, depending on which church you belong to, there's variations in the number of books, especially in the Old Testament. So the Bible that's right here, which is the English Standard Version, all the Bibles that we use today are translations of other Bibles, or meaning other Bibles, meaning Bible from the original text, like Hebrew and Greek. Most of the Old Testament was written in Hebrew. Obviously, we are talking 2,000 years before, or more than 2,000 years, like 3,500 years before, right? So language always change over time. And this is Hebrew Bible, and later which was translated into certain different languages. One of the earliest translations of the Christian Bible with the Old Testament and the New Testament is in Syriac. That is one of the oldest manuscripts we have. Manuscript means an original version of a translated book, or any book. It's an original version, handwritten, because printing press didn't start till 16th century, I believe 16th or 15th century. So back in the day, people used to just write in scrolls, in different types of medium, using different types of ink, or sometimes it is using hard and sharp things that would actually, it's kind of like ingrained in the leather or papyrus rolls or whatever. So there was one of the oldest versions that we see in of Bible, of the Christian Bible, is one of the Syrian versions, and actually that's from the 4th century. So anyways, depending on which church you belong to, there's the number of text varies, the number of books in the Bible varies. It's a minor difference. The current version I have right here, is an English Standard Version. It has 66 books, including the New Testament and the Old Testament. The Catholic Bible has some additional books. They're called the Apocrypha books, or Deuterocanonical books. We don't need to go into the details with that. But there's a few more, which is 72 books. 73, I think, 73. And the Orthodox Bible, the Orthodox Study Bible, the one that I have upstairs, does have a little bit more. I think it's around like 80 or 81. I don't remember the exact number. This Bible right here, along with the English Standard Version that we have right here, it's a New American Bible. And this Bible has all the, it's not the Orthodox Study Bible. This Bible has a lot of all the other books, meaning all the Apocrypha books. So it has a total of 73 books. And then the study Bible that we have upstairs, the Orthodox study Bible we have upstairs, has more books. I think it's like 80. But the thing is that it's a collection of books, and it's compiled over a long period of time. Kind of like, I think, 1,500 to 2,000 years or so. A lot of time. Who wrote the first version of it, right? So when you say who wrote the first Bible, you mean who wrote the first books of the Bible, right? Is that what you mean? Who started it? The first books, which one is the first book? Which Genesis, that's right. So Genesis, followed by Exodus, followed by
Leviticus.
And
Numbers.
and
Deuteronomy.
Deuteronomy. These are the 5 books that we believe, or we give the authorship to Moses. We believe that Moses wrote it. We don't, we in churches, we do believe that the authorship remains with Moses, but we don't think that Moses physically wrote it. We think that it was passed along from Moses to the other generations as something called oral tradition. Oral tradition means that as your dad, I will pass along something to you, which you will pass along to your kids, which your kids pass along to their kids, and their kids pass along to their kids. So it kind of goes over different generations. So that is what oral tradition is. So what we believe is that it was oral tradition that actually took the Bible from the original times of during the time of Moses to later times when they actually started to put it together. So putting it together were primarily done by the Jewish scribes. Scribes are people who write and rewrite stuff. So it must have happened a lot later, after the temple was built, during the time of David or during the time of Solomon or later. I don't know the exact history on when it actually was happening or when it started. I don't know if these are kind of assumptions to an extent too. But what we know is that we did have these books during the time of Jesus. Jesus referred to the Old Testament, right? And he had a version of the Old Testament that was at the temple that he used, because there's one of the stories that we find in the Gospel of Luke where he actually takes the book of Isaiah and reads it while he was at the temple. So we know that there was a version of the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament that was available during the time of Jesus. Then come the New Testament, and we do have we do have enough evidence that tells us who wrote the New Testament writings. So there's either writings, some of the older versions that they found, which is part of something called Dead Sea Scrolls, which is found, I believe, in the mid-1900s, like 1947 or 46 or so, in Israel, and scholars are doing a lot of analysis of all that. But what we know more or less is that from that time, from the time of Jesus, the 1st century, the 2nd century, the 3rd century, the fathers of the church, when I say fathers of the church, that includes all the churches, because churches were still one till the 4th century or the 5th century, and then there was a split, and then there was a split in the 11th century, then there was a split in the 16th century. So a lot of the initial writings of the church fathers, which is fathers of all the churches, had a lot of quotes from the New Testament that can literally replicate the New Testament. So we know that all these documents kind of existed at that time. Make sense?
Yeah.
You have a question, Jonathan. Go ahead.
So how would they find some of the older scrolls, even though they should have disintegrated in the ground?
Not everything does get disintegrated, right? So some of them are kept safe, like in stored safe. Something called, you should look up when you get back on your computer, something called Dead Sea Scrolls. Dead Sea Scrolls. Take a look and see what comes up, and that would give you a little bit of a information on how they found it and who found it and all. So some things were kept safer, some things were kept or they sustained 2,000 years. Make sense?
Yeah.
So maybe you can look up Dead Sea Scrolls and kind of tell us about what you found out when we do our podcast next week. And do that?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so next week, guys, you have Jonathan will briefly talk about what he found out when he researches Dead Sea Scrolls. Dead Sea Scrolls is one of the things I will be talking about in the next podcast. Shall we go to the next question?
Yeah.
All right, Jeremiah, go ahead.
When was the Ark of the Covenant made?
I think we talked about that last week, right? I think you're going to ask who made the Ark of the Covenant.
Who made the Ark?
That's right. Who made the... So, what happens in any culture is that we have people who do skilled labor, right? Especially in the olden times. People who work with wood, people who work with metal, people who work in the farms, people who work with animals, people who cultivate crops. So all different kinds of work that people do, right? So even today, we have people who do the farm. Which farm do you know that is near us? Go ahead.
Soli Brothers and Tanners.
Soli Brothers and Tanners. What do we get from Soli Brothers?
Honey.
Honey, vegetables, fruits, right? And what do we get from Tanners usually?
Ice cream.
And milk. And Tanners have a lot of cows, which we have gone and seen, right? And
Yeah.
Soli has a lot of land that they cultivate for.
I've also seen Soli Brothers' land.
That's right. You have been there as a from your school, right?
Yeah.
That's right. So what they do is that they do a lot of farming. So what that means is that people do farming. People do different kind of trades or different kind of skills. And in the olden times too, there used to be people who work with wood, people who work with design, people who work on building things. So there is this portion in Exodus. It is Exodus 31. Exodus 31 verses 1 onwards. I'm going to read it, right? The Lord said to Moses, "See, I have called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God, with ability and intelligence, with knowledge and all craftsmanship, to devise artistic designs, to work in gold, silver, and bronze, in cutting stones for setting, and in carving wood, to work in every craft. And behold, I have appointed with him Oholiab." I don't know if I'm pronouncing these names right. These are old Jewish names. "The son of Ahisamach of the tribe of Dan. And I have given to all able men ability that they may make all that I have commanded you, the tent of meeting, and the ark of the testimony, and the mercy seat that is on it, and all the furnishings of the tent, the table and its utensils, and the pure lampstand with all its utensils, and the altar of incense, and the altar of the burnt offering with all its utensils, and the basin and its stand, and the finely worked garments, the holy garments for Aaron the priest, and the garments of his son for their service as priests, and the anointing oil and the fragrant incense for the holy place. According to all that I have commanded you, they shall do." So two people, Oholiab and Bezalel. These were the two people that in Exodus 31 we see that was appointed by God to work on what? All kind of metal and wood carving and stones, to make all these things that they needed for the tabernacle.
How would they find the gold? Wouldn't they need like tools to get it?
They must have had different kinds of tools that they used back in the day, because gold mining and mining of other metals were happening for a long time. So they must have had, you can look into the Egyptian pyramids, and they have had a lot of minerals and metals. And same thing with a lot of other old kingdoms had a lot of metal, and they must have figured out different ways to do it. An archaeologist might be able to answer that. I can't. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Any questions?
No.
That's it. Yes, this is one of our shorter episodes. Alright, so shall we conclude then?
Yeah.
Yes.
Alright, who's going to conclude?
Me.
Alright, Jonathan, go ahead.
This was our sixth episode. The end of our sixth episode of Lemon and Spoon. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Instagram,
Gmail, Lemon and Spoon 5, Lemon and Spoon
05
at gmail.com.
Alright, so thank you guys for listening. Appreciate it. If you have questions, reach out to us. Have a good week.
Bye.
Bye.